Hello, I just wanted to make a few notes here, and they're about the subject which has come to be known as Wicca. Though when I was in my teens, this was generally simply referred to as witchcraft, and that's kind of what we thought witchcraft was. Um, I wanted to uh, make these notes because uh, what I learnt of witchcraft in the 1970s, largely through the output of people like Maxine and Alexanders, um, was for me very profound, and it affected me very greatly. And it stayed with me because when you're at that age, you're very receptive to things. Um, but I just wanted to try and put down some notes about this because obviously my view of a lot of things has changed over the years as I've gained some experience and knowledge of different things. Um, but the value of what I experienced early on remains with me. And I wanted to look at that because I feel quite a bit of it is sort of lost in the meantime in the popularization of Wicca, which has occurred. That's how it appears to me, anyway. I'm not going to be talking as a polytheist in this case, even though I am one. I want to try and be a little bit broader to try and look at things, because obviously, uh, Wicca is as is said, an orthopraxic religion, yeah, and so it's not really a religion which determines um, dogmatic belief in that way, but you can look at different sort of approaches to the sacred and different approaches to sort of the sacred in religion and different um, ways of doing things. And they can tell you something about or imply something about how the sacred is being understood, how the sacred is being approached. Um, and what really occurs to me with witchcraft as I learnt of it, and we'll call it Wicca from here on, yeah. What I really learnt of it, how it appeared to me, was that it was a religion not just of mystery, but also a religion of love, and very definitively a religion of love. That's how it appeared to me. Um, and that certainly spoke to me because the place of the horned god in my own personal life was so very deep, even by then, um, that the whole question of love was very central to it. Yeah. But if we look at what it means, when you look at Wicca and you see, in general, it's understood to have a god and a goddess. Yeah. And so you could say, well, how is Wicca portraying the sacred? How is it truthfully being portrayed here? Yeah. And if I look at it, what I would say that Wicca is portraying the sacred as is not even so much as a god and a goddess, but it's portraying the sacred as relationship. And it's portraying the sacred as a relationship of love. And that is, I think, what is the most fundamental subtext of Wicca for me in that way. That it portrays the sacred as relationship. And I think that's immensely powerful. I think that's what draws people to it. I think that's what gives people hope in it and inspiration. It is relationship and love. Now, what gets in the way of that? Well, potentially a great deal. And you see this I'm afraid you see this in a lot of popularized neo-paganism, in which Wicca has been very influential. What really gets in the way of it is, I think, sexual ego, because, as I said, it's not portraying a god and a goddess as the sacred. I think it's portraying relationship, because you cannot think of one without the other in this case. And least of all is it portraying men and women, or as they will probably say, women and men, as the sacred. It's portraying relationship. But when you bring in sexual ego, you bring in separation, and you bring in a whole load of things. And I'd have to say that quite a bit of neo-pagan psychology seems to exhibit elements of a very dense kind of female narcissism on the part of some, and a very strange kind of male masochism on the part of others. And they have a very odd dance that they play around each other, and I can't see much of the sacred in it, because it's all sexual politics, basically. And so I think that's one of the biggest problems that you would eventually have coming into this if you're not careful. Yeah? Because you'd have to understand sexual politics is not love and is not relationship. Politics is not love and is not relationships. Politics is really war by other means, really. That is the essence of politics, honestly. And that is not what we're talking about. So there is that. And the other thing that I think gets in the way is kind of conventionalized social thinking. So that rather than seeing the sacred as relationship, we see social role as divinity. And that's, again, these are dreadful things. Now, unless you have a sense of the sacred, a sense of the, whatever you want to call it, transcendent, and you can transcend not just upwards but downwards, but yeah, unless you have a sense of the primacy of the spiritual, the actual primacy of the spiritual, unless you have a sense of that, and you don't imagine that the sacred is simply a kind of psychologizing of human functioning into some sort of like a sort of like a numinous realm in our imaginations. Yeah, unless you understand that, you can make a lot of very, very, very big blunders. Yeah, and you can completely invert things, and so then you get social role as divinity, and it's completely conventional thinking, and there's no spirituality in it as far as I can see. So those are the problems. However, if you're aware of the problems and you're aware of the mystery that's being offered there, which is to understand and explore the divine as relationship and as a relationship of love, then I think you can have really something to look at. Yeah. And that's what I first saw in Wicca. Now, the other thing that I wanted to just touch upon there is, this is coming from more from the point of view of a polytheist, maybe, but there is something which came about, and a lot of this comes from Diane Fortune, I think, yeah. And it's this idea that we've got a god and a goddess, if you're Wiccan, yeah. We've got a god and a goddess, and all the gods are one god, and all the gods are facets of one god, and all the goddesses are facets of one goddess, yeah. Yeah. That's quite a common opinion. It's quite a common teaching, it seems, amongst certain Wiccans, yeah. And like I said, I think this comes from Diane Fortune. All gods are one god, all goddesses are one goddess, and there is one initiator overall. That was her saying, yeah. Now, with the experience that I've had over the years, I think they kind of got this half right and half really, really, really wrong, yeah. Absolutely, I do not consider all gods to be one god, and I do not consider all goddesses to be one goddess, and that in itself has an odd way of almost like sacralizing gender itself in some weird way. But anyway, the point is, though, I do not think that all gods are one god and all goddesses are one goddess. However, the experience that I've had over the years and that other people have had over the years has certainly convinced me that the god of the witches is a multifaceted god, and the goddess of the witches is a multifaceted deity, yeah? But these are still discrete entities. They are not all gods, all goddesses. That's not so, as far as I'm concerned. But they did have some of it right, in that the god of the witches does have different faces, faces which could surprise you, and the same in many ways for the goddess of the witches. So that's the other thing I would say, yeah. And it's funny because in Wicca, there's so much which is potentially there, and so much which is, it has got something, especially in its old form, in its original form, yeah, by which I mean going back to the sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, yeah. It really had something. There was something there. I think it's since then it's got a little bit buried in the popularizations and the ultimate sort of, I don't want to say dumbing down, mainstreaming, I guess you'd say. Yeah. Uh, but there is something there. And that something is of, I think it's of tremendous value. Yeah. Um, and I think it's probably not what people generally think it is. So that's all I've got to say for today. Hope you enjoyed that, and see you soon.